Hello, gorgeous. I hope you're okay. As this podcast is being released, I'm on my way home to Italy. I'm hoping to be at my house by the end of the weekend, but it's always a bit of a mission because we always take our truck loaded to the max and with our 2 cats and 2 dogs on board. So, all things going well, it takes us about 3 days to get home. So, I recorded this podcast well ahead of time. But this is a really important one, and I'm aiming it mostly at women who are trying to build or rebuild something in their lives, who are looking for support to do it. Whether it's a body pulling back together or simply wanting to change, or whether it's a business you're building or hoping to grow, there is a lot of help out there to get you where you want to be. But what I'm here to tell you right now is that not all of that help is good help. I found myself in an interesting situation at the weekend that threw up a lot of stuff for me. It didn't upset me, but it did bring it up, and it has compelled me to share those experiences, this latest one and the one it dragged back into my consciousness, because I would just love to help you avoid falling into the same god-awful trap. A few years ago, I joined a business school. On initial investigations, they seemed pretty legit. The testimonials were good. The founder had a pretty good, convincing backstory, and they assured me that my business was a good fit for their growth model. They promised to help me build things. They went to great lengths to describe the potential business benefits for me of being involved with them. These included one-to-one mentorship and regular training sessions that my membership would cover the cost of. They invited me to an initial weekend taster event, and I agreed to go. There was no cost to me apart from my fuel to get there and my accommodation at a B&B near to this lovely mansion with its purpose-built training annex on site. Lunches, training sessions and networking, all free. It seemed worthwhile, so I went along. There were probably about 60 of us, mostly new startups, or so I thought. Well, the first day consisted of the trainers and the course providers telling us all about what was on offer and what we could expect to get at the end of it. There wasn't an accredited component to this, but that didn't bother me much because I wasn't there for qualifications. I already have more than enough of that stuff. I wanted the knowledge, the how-to of building my business with the support of all these amazingly successful people. We all left at the end of that first day feeling like, with their help, we could conquer the world. Day 2 was the hard sell day. It didn't start out as that, at least not to those of us who'd been gullible enough to have already got sucked in a fair way into the hype. Some of the people who'd already gone through the program had been drafted in to tell us their success stories, and some of those were impressive. What I didn't realize at the time was that they were simply hooking us in even further. And just before we broke for what we knew would be a very delicious lunch, the hard sell really started. This is what the membership will cost you, but this is what you get, and we can arrange finance for you. It's just £150 today, and we'll set you up for the rest. Oh, and by the way, we're handing out a form for you to fill out just before we break for lunch because we'll be giving one of our packages away. Yes, one of you will get the cost of your package refunded. We just need to know why you want this opportunity, what it might mean for you, and what you think it will do for you. So we all scribbled our reasons for wanting to sign up for this package, thereby reinforcing to ourselves how much we did and saying why we thought we deserved to have it for free. So I'm picking they got some vulnerable stories from a fair few people about why they needed the help on offer. We handed in our forms and went to a very sumptuous lunch, during which various people came and introduced themselves in the spirit of networking, and we all had conversations in which we pretty much all managed to convince one another to go for it, all of us wondering if we might be the lucky recipient of the freebie. I decided to sign up for a package straight after lunch. I think probably about 75% of us probably did, and we happily did it. I was asked to agree to an estimate of what the crew thought I could earn in the coming 2 years with their support, and I was given finance on that basis. I didn't know at the time that that was a little bit shy of legal, and I don't know how the organisers convinced the finance company to lend money to any of us on that basis, but they did, and as I discovered much later, they did it in such a way that we had no comeback from that. We were committed financially, and that was that. Well, a couple of hours after we'd all signed our lives away, we were told who'd won the freebie. I wasn't surprised that it wasn't me because I never usually win anything, but the guy who won it didn't seem particularly surprised. He was happy, yes, but he wasn't exactly overcome at having won £10,000 worth of training for free. Yep, that's what I was suddenly in hock for. 10 grand. And the winner's lack of enthusiasm wasn't the warning bell it should have been for me. I was feeling a bit like a rabbit in the headlights at having thrown myself into a debt pool, but I was telling myself that it would be worth it. So a few of us swapped our details before we all disbanded, promising to keep in touch, and we were told that our first training session would be in a month and we'd be advised of the details. We all assumed that we'd be going back to the same place. The mansion was apparently where the organisers lived. Imagine my surprise then when the first training session turned out to be in a scruffy little upstairs room in a nearby golf club. Apparently we couldn't go back to the annex we'd all been enrolled at because of logistics, unquote. We weren't offered lunch and everything was rushed and only half coherent. I left that training session wondering what the hell I'd got myself into. Well, in accordance with the plan, I was then assigned a mentor, a young guy, 30-something years younger than myself, who didn't understand my business or what I was trying to do. After a few fruitless sessions, I asked to change mentor, and the guy I was then assigned to left not long after. So I had a third, and we started from scratch. Well, long story short, as it all turned out, this was more or less a scam situation. I also found out later that half of the candidates at the original 2-day seminar were the mentors, and others drafted in for networking and to help convince us all over that second lunch that they were going to go for it, and their enthusiasm rubbed off on us all. They had no intention of buying packages. They were simply willing pawns in this so-called company's game. I don't know how much they were paid, presumably something for their weekend's work. Anyway, after 6 months of getting nowhere and making no progress with my business with their input, I bailed on that group, but I was still saddled with the debt. They're no longer operating, at least not under the name they were trading as back then, and in the interest of avoiding being sued for slander, I'm not going to name them. But the experience was devastating and traumatizing, and it has left me with a very deep mistrust of any coach or coaching company. Things like that stay with you, don't they? The hardest part for me of that whole miserable experience was telling my husband what had happened. I was in absolute bits telling him. That was pretty hard, but he was pretty good about it, and he told me to stop beating myself up about it and not to be ashamed of having been so spectacularly hoodwinked. As he rightly pointed out, I'm not a stupid person by any stretch. I've been around the block enough to have seen and heard and learned a few things. But that's how good they were, that crowd. They were cleverer than me. A lot of people are, to be fair. But they did something I could never do in all good conscience, never in a million years. They got a bunch of hopeful people into a room and preyed on their vulnerability and gave them false hope and sent them all into debt to the tune of 10,000 quid. I was one of them, and I know that for some of those people, investing that money probably actually ruined them. It nearly ruined me. And what concerns me the most about all of this is that it's still happening. In fact, it's happening more and more and more. Charismatic people are becoming ever more sophisticated in their resourcefulness in trying to get you to part with your money. My most recent experience with this happened just last week. Quite a while ago, I had an email from a woman who'd probably heard one of my podcasts, which are all aimed at women just like me, older women working to stay relevant in a society that would actually prefer not to see us. The email told me that she was looking for speakers. I fired off a quick response saying that if she wanted to talk to me, I would be open to having a chat. I'm no stranger to the stage, after all, and I thought if I can get my own empowerment message across, that would be great. So that was it, and I thought no more about it. But then I was sent a form to fill in and send back with my bio, etc., and I did that. And then I was offered an appointment with this woman to talk about the event she wanted speakers for. She runs a fairly successful enterprise focused on women's empowerment. I was requested by her PA to ring this lady at a specific time early on a Friday afternoon. So I did. And she said, "Oh, honey, I can't talk right now. I'm in the middle of a crisis. Can you give me half an hour?" Sure thing, I said, and I rang her back in half an hour. And she said, oh, I'm so sorry, I just need 10 more minutes. Again, no problem. 10 minutes later, my third phone call to this woman led me straight to her answer phone. I left a message saying I wasn't sure what to do anymore, but maybe she could phone me when she wasn't busy. So 10 minutes after that, she rang me and gave me a story about a friend in a domestic violence situation that she had to drop everything for so she could help. I thought that was fair enough, and she said to me, thank you for not being upset. I thought you might be. And unfortunately, I don't have any time left to talk to you today, but I'd like to invite you to an event I'm having at the weekend at a 5-star hotel in a very posh part of London. It's a special breakfast event followed by a couple of hours of networking. Come as my special guest, and I'll make sure we get some time to chat after that. Oh, and wear a pretty dress and some heels, and don't forget your lipstick. She mentioned something about feeling my lovely energy through the phone, and I had a giggle to myself at that. Both she and the whole damn thing sounded ludicrous, and it was really only curiosity that drove me to turn up. But I did, and I immediately walked into the tiniest space, really only big enough for about a dozen or so people, where there were actually about 40 jammed in, trying to move and trying to get coffee and pastries, which was, I presume, the breakfast that she talked about. Well, the pastries were dry and the coffee was terrible, but I did get to talk to a couple of people, and then the lady of the hour turned up in her designer certain shoes and shepherded us into a different room, laid out for a seminar with a stage at the front, with 2 armchairs and a bunch of microphones. It wasn't laid out for networking. Oh, this will be interesting, I thought to myself. And interesting wasn't the word. Our lady started off beautifully, telling us all how gorgeous we looked. And then with little further preamble, she opened the floor and invited a random woman who was sitting in the front row to come and have a seat with her at the front of the stage. There began an interview. It largely consisted of this woman complimenting Our Lady and telling her how much being involved with her had changed her life in just 2 short years. She made a point of telling us all how far she'd driven to be at this event because missing it would be unthinkable. After that, Our Lady continued with her motivational pitch, which was decent, to be fair. A lot of what she said made sense, but none of it was stuff I didn't already know. And then, lo and behold, another person in the front row, who was sitting next to the one who'd been interviewed first, suddenly had an attack of overwhelm and dramatically left the room, fanning her face, blowing hard and crying and wailing. A bunch of women stormed off after her, including Our Lady, and after a lot of very dramatic, guttural crying and swooning, the overwhelmee came back into the room and was guided to one of the armchairs at the front and invited to tell us all her circumstances, which were, admittedly, difficult. We all appreciated that and we all felt for her. But then, out of the blue, Our Lady told her, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to gift you one of my top-line membership packages. At which point the overwhelmee starts hyperventilating and crying again and being over profuse with her thanks. Interestingly, a woman at the back of the room came forward and tried to offer this overwhelmee some independent support, free of charge, out of the goodness of her heart, and Our Lady very firmly told her to back off. Clearly, that wasn't part of the script. Ding dong, the warning bells were ringing their socks off by now, in my head at least, as the overwhelmee was then led away, overcome with the emotion of gratitude by a member of Our Lady's team. 5 minutes later, she was back, sitting in her seat again, and all smiles, as if her Oscar-worthy meltdown of 15 minutes earlier had never happened. Does anyone recover that fast? Well, as one who wears her emotions like a heart on her sleeve, it was all I could do to keep a straight face at this point. I had to keep covering my mouth and poking my finger into my chin to try and stop myself from grinning like a Cheshire cat. Our Lady started banging on about being a psychologist, and that was funny because I'm a psychologist too, and I knew exactly what was going on in that room. But people around me were all misty-eyed, wanting to believe in and align themselves with the stupendous kindness of this benevolent, wonderful woman. Then the hard sell really started a little. She told us what her membership packages were and then said that for today only, unquote, she would shave 50% off them, but only if we shelled out right there and there on the day. Then, oh wait, it gets better. The overwhelmee gets hauled up from her chair again, and our lady tells her, "There's someone I want you to meet, darling." And another woman comes up to the front, clutching a book she's written and published with the oddest speed, and said, "Just last month I was you. I was where you are now. And I was gifted a top-line membership too, and I've gone on to write and publish my own book, and I'd like you to have a copy. I'm going to be speaking on world stages, and you will be too." Well, I felt like I was watching the finest theatre of my life. Then this woman shares a little of her journey, and the crocodile tears start from Our Lady. But only for a minute or two. She allows everyone to see her anguish, and then she makes an incredible job of recovering and composing herself before then going on to say something along the lines of, "Well, if you're not willing to commit today to this wonderful group of incredible women who are reinventing themselves, you'll never be ready. And if you don't feel you're ready, please do not join." I tell you what, every last one of those people is in the wrong job. They should be actors because they're better than a lot of people who are actors. It was entertainment at its absolute finest. But here's the thing. A lot of people in that room had fallen for the lot. They swallowed it hook, line, and sinker. So many new people, all there for the first time at what was quite possibly their first ever encounter with someone who was clever and charismatic enough to have them convinced that they needed to be part of this wonderful, nurturing community and willing to part with their hard-earned money to do it, to join. I left at the first coffee break knowing that it takes more than a month for anyone to write a book that's any good and publish it. I left knowing that crocodile tears are exactly that. I left knowing that nobody in business offers expensive freebies to someone they've met for less than 5 minutes without first finding out whether they're a good fit for that substantial investment. And I left knowing that if you choose the right people to act in ways that are convincing, you can get someone else to commit to almost anything. What I didn't have to learn was what I already knew, that Our Lady is a player and she tried to play me. And it doesn't surprise me in the least that as someone who was so keen to talk to me after her event, she hasn't even followed up on the fact that I left quite early. Was I ill? Did I have a crisis of my own? Did I have another pressing appointment? Was I still interested in speaking at her event? Well, how would she know? She didn't follow up because she didn't actually care. I meant nothing to her, and I never had, and that was no surprise, and it didn't upset me. Maybe she figured out that I had her figured out, and that being the case, why would she call me? The woman is a master of smoke and mirrors, but unfortunately not to me. I don't doubt that for the right people, she has something to offer. Some people who join these types of so-called empowerment groups do well, but I also know from experience and observation that they're in the minority. The majority don't get what they pay for, what they hope for, or what they're promised. When I looked at people in the audience, I saw rapt faces, truly a dangerous thing. And that is why I'm doing this podcast. I want to tell you right now that there are a lot of incredibly clever, charming, stupendously manipulative people out there preying on the hopes and dreams and finances of people like me, like you, and every other woman who wants to make a success of her life or her business. At startup stage, a lot of women don't have much money to try and move themselves forward. It needs to be a very careful decision as to where a woman invests what she has. At the weekend, Our Lady was wearing designer clothes and shoes, talking about what a wonderful life she has, jetting around the world on motivational speaking and recruitment engagements. But she does all that off the back of the money that vulnerable and hopeful women have paid her to help them grow their businesses. And when I unpacked her offering, and I mean really unpacked it, I couldn't see how it was worth the money. And that is what you have to do. It doesn't matter if they think you're paranoid or nervous or obsessive about, keeping your money close to your chest. It doesn't matter a blind bloody bit what anyone thinks of you taking the time, doing the research, making sure you're fully informed about someone and what they're offering you, before you make the decision to go for it or not. I left Our Lady's event feeling frustrated, not for myself, but on behalf of every woman I'd left there in that room who couldn't see the real wood for the prettiness of the trees. Maybe they'll invest, and maybe they won't lose their shirts or their hope or their trust, but I'm thinking maybe they just might. Who knows? But I didn't hang around to wait for Our Lady to find the time to talk to me. I knew that even if she did, all she'd want would be for me to invest in her, to pay to speak on one of her stages. Well, I'm sorry, honey. You're beautiful and dynamic and positive and all those lovely things we all want more of, and you have a lot of street cred, to be fair. But I've been on this street before, and all this experience has left me with is the absolute, unshakable conviction that there are other routes to success that don't involve lining someone else's pockets for what amounts in the end to minimal help. And the underhand manipulative tactics, they really did annoy me. Business people with integrity don't have to do that. I want all women to think very carefully before signing up and paying thousands of pounds to anyone with a self-made rags to riches story who promises you wildly fantastic things. I'm not saying they're all self-serving charlatans. I know there are some very good people out there who can help us to achieve success, and they've carved out new careers for themselves on the back of adversity. I'm hooked in with a couple of people I do trust as business mentors. They're worth every penny of what I'm paying them because they don't charge the earth and promise miracles. They are pragmatic, work-focused, and goal-focused. They don't care whether I show up in a pretty dress and lipstick or my PJs, for God's sake. They also allow me to pay for my memberships or subscriptions monthly so I can bail anytime I want. If something isn't working for me, it's simply a non-stop on an auto payment. It's not the loss of thousands of pounds of my hard-earned cash. Please don't simply fall for the face value options you're offered by charming, successful, and wildly enthusiastic people. Unpack their offering and see what it really entails. Do a bit of spade work, dig around, read reviews. And bear in mind, if there are more than one or two negative reviews from people saying similar things, it's worth considering that it's probably more than just a couple of disgruntled and disappointed buyers talking. If there's a common theme of complaint or dissatisfaction, it's worth considering whether their experience might end up being yours, and think about what that would mean for you if it was. I made a terrible mistake with the business school that I'm still paying the price for. It wasn't just a monetary loss for me, it created trust issues, and I'm still very wary of a lot of people. But it's like I said earlier, it doesn't matter if someone thinks you're indecisive or overcautious when it comes to making up your mind about who to run with. If they can't be patient with you, if they're urging you into a now or never decision, especially on a big investment, it's because your money is more important to them than your success. And if they're enticing you with potential freebies and extraordinary acts of kindness that people in business normally wouldn't do, they're manipulating you. Pure and simple. Stepping back and, thinking things over, it's the best self-serving strategy. And the best and the most reliable barometer of all is your gut instinct. If your gut feeling is causing you to waver, take the time. And if choosing not to invest in someone is the decision that feels right, it matters not one jot what anyone else thinks. Let them think what they want, because if it all goes tits up, they're not the biggest loser, you are. Backing the wrong horse can be a big mistake that can be really hard to come back from. If you're not careful, it could cost you a lot more than just the money you'll lose. I made stupid mistakes, and in learning from them, I'm hopeful that you won't have to. Okay, I'll talk to you soon.